Welcome friends. Today's lecture is ecotoxicology. The main objectives of this lecture are to understand the concept of ecotoxicology, the chemical movement, fate and exposure, chemical behavior and bioavailability, effects of toxicants at different levels of ecological hierarchy, and ecosystem vulnerability to toxicants. Dear friends, ecotoxicology is the science of contaminants in the biosphere and their effects on constituents of the biosphere, including humans. The term ecotoxicology was introduced by Trueheart in 1969, and this field is a natural extension of toxicology. It is best defined as the study of the fate and effects of toxic substances on an ecosystem and is based on scientific research employing both field and laboratory methods. Although this definition would encompass toxic chemicals naturally found in the environment, for example, animal venom, microbial and plant toxic. Environmental toxicology is typically associated with the study of environmental chemicals of anthropogenic origin. Environmental toxicology can be divided into two subcategories. Number one, environmental health toxicology and ecotoxicology. Environmental health toxicology is the study of the adverse effects of environmental chemicals on human health, while ecotoxicology focuses upon the effects of environmental contaminants upon ecosystems and constituents thereof, that is fish and wildlife, etc. Environmental toxicology, as it is related to ecotoxicology, requires an understanding of ecological principles and theory as well as grasp of how chemicals affect individuals, populations, communities and ecosystems on the whole. Ecotoxicology builds on the science of toxicology and the principles of toxicological testing, though its emphasis is more at the population, community and ecosystem levels. Ecotoxicology is a synthetic science that combines causal explanations and information from many sciences, particularly biogeochemistry, ecology, mammalian, aquatic and wildlife toxicology. As ecotoxicology is an applied science, ecotoxicologists take on different roles that are also not fully integrated. Some ecologists are concerned chiefly with scientific goals, that is organizing facts around explanatory principles. Others focus on the technical goals, that is developing and applying tools to generate high quality information about ecotoxicological phenomena. Still others focus closely on resolving specific practical problems such as assessing ecological risk due to chemical exposure or the effectiveness of a proposed remediation action. The goal of practical ecotoxicology is the use of existing science and technology to document or solve specific problems such as remediating harm done by a chemical spill. Much of practical ecotoxicology is currently done within the ecological risk assessment framework. Ecological risk assessments can be retroactive, predictive or comparative. A retroactive ecological risk assessment estimates the risk from an existing situation such as contaminated site, whereas predictive ecological risk assessment predicts the same for a future situation such as the proposed licensing of a new agrochemical. A comparative risk assessment might be done if the risks of two or more alternative actions are to be contrasted during environmental decision making. Now, the chemical movement, fate and exposure. To characterize chemical behavior, it is necessary to measure the chemical in different environmental compartments, for example, air, soil, water and the biological systems. Understanding the movement and transport of chemical within and among these compartments, a likely scenario for a chemical released into the environment entails its release into one environmental component. It is subsequently partitioned among environmental compartments. It is involved in movement and reaction within each compartment. It is partitioned between each compartment and the biota that reside in that compartment, and it finally reaches an active site in an organism at high enough concentration for long enough to induce an effect. Chemodynamics is the study of chemical release, distribution, degradation and fate in the environment. It can also describe chemical movement or adsorption into organisms. Single phase chemical behavior. Once a synthetic chemical enters the environment, it is acted upon primarily by natural forces. Models are used to predict the effect of natural forces on the movement of chemicals in the environment. This requires the incorporation of abiotic variables into valid models. These variables include temperature, wind, water flow directions and velocities, incident solar radiations, atmospheric pressure and humidity, and the concentration of chemical in one of the four matrices, that is atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere and biosphere. Intraphase movement consists of mass transfer diffusion or dispersion within a single phase. Movement in atmosphere. Contaminants enter into the atmosphere primarily through evaporation and stack emissions, etc., and their transport in this compartment generally occurs more rapidly than other matrices. Contaminants transport in air occur primarily by diffusional processes and advection. The diffusion rate of a contaminant in air is approximately 100-fold faster than the same contaminant in water and is a function of phase viscosity and existing concentration gradients. The contaminant diffusivity in air depends on its molecular weight compared to air, air temperature, the molecular separation at collision, the energy of molecular interaction and the Boltzmann constant. Wind currents transport airborne contaminants much more rapidly than does diffusion. Atmospheric stability affects the amount of turbulence and thus the degree of vertical mixing in the atmosphere. Movement in the hydrosphere. Contaminants enter the hydrosphere by direct application, spills, wet and dry deposition and interphase movement. In addition, chemicals enter the hydrosphere by direct dissolution of lighter than water spills in the form of slicks or from pools on the bottom of channels, rivers or waterways. Chemical movement in the hydrosphere occurs through diffusion, dispersion and bulk flow of water. Away from the boundaries of other media, that is air and soil, transport in water is dominated by turbulence. Even in seemingly still water, water is constantly moving in vertical and horizontal eddies. These eddies are small pockets of water that form and subside and during the process transport the contaminant. This mode of transport is defined as eddy diffusion. Movement in lithosphere. Contaminants enter the soil by processes similar to those for the hydrosphere. Soils have varying porosities due to their composition, % sand, silt, clay and organic matter, but pores are invariably filled with either gases or fluids. Chemical movement in the soil occurs by diffusion in these fluids or by the movement of water through the voids between soil particles. The chemical diffusion rate in soil depends on molecular weight, soil temperature, the path length and the magnitude of concentration gradient. Contaminants leave the soil by interphase transport or decomposition. Chemical transport between phases. Once released, a chemical can enter any of the four matrices. the atmosphere by evaporation, the lithosphere by adsorption, the hydrosphere by dissolution, and the biosphere by absorption, inhalation, or ingestion, depending on the species. Once in a matrix, the contaminant can enter into another matrix by interphase transport. Transport between air and water. A chemical can leave water by volatilization. Conversely, an airborne contaminant can move into an aqueous phase by absorption. At equilibrium, the net rates of volatilization and absorption are equal, and the total mass transference of the contaminant is 0. In non-equilibrium conditions, the rate of net movement of a chemical from one phase to another phase depends on how far the system is away from equilibrium, as well as the magnitude of the overall mass transfer coefficient. Transport between soil and water. A contaminant can leave soil and enter the water through the process of desorption. Waterborne contaminants can also adsorb on soil particles. The rate of mass transfer depends on the contaminant-specific overall mass transfer coefficient, the bulk flow velocity of water over the water-soil interface, and physicochemical properties of the soil, such as particle size distribution and organic matter content. Transport between soil and air. A contaminant can leave the soil and enter the overlying air through the process of volatilization. This process is dependent on the vapor pressure of the chemical and its affinity for the soil. Chemical behavior and bioavailability. An appreciation of how physicochemical properties influence contaminant behavior is necessary to anticipate chemical concentrations and speciation in different environmental compartments. The goal of this process is to assess the potential bioconcentration, uptake of contaminants from the external environment, bioaccumulation, uptake of contaminants from the external environments and food, and biomagnifications, increase in the concentration of the contaminants at higher tropic levels in the organisms. In the environment, only a portion of the total quantity of chemical present is potentially available for uptake by organisms, referred to as the biological availability or bioavailability of a chemical. Chemical bioavailability in various environmental compartments ultimately dictates toxicity. Therefore, it is important to characterize exposure on a site-specific basis. The behavior and bioavailability of contaminants in the water column have been shown to relate directly to their water solubility. However, the presence of certain constituents in water may affect the apparent water solubility of toxicants. The apparent increase in water solubility did not necessarily indicate an increase in pesticide bioavailability. In soils, sorption also controls the bioavailability of contaminants. Tight sorption or sequestration of contaminants with increasing residence time in soil, often referred to as aging, has also been documented, especially for lipophilic organic contaminants. Now, the effects of toxicants at different levels of ecological hierarchy. Industrial and agricultural endeavors are intimately associated with the extensive use of a wide array of chemicals. The chemicals are generally various metals and metallides, etc., referred to as toxicants. Historically, chemical wastes generated through industrial processes were disposed of through flagrant release into the environment. Gases quickly disperse into the atmosphere, liquids were diluted into receiving waters, and efficiently transported away from the site of generation. The main effects of toxicants at different levels of ecological hierarchy are: number 1, effects on population. A population in ecological terms refers to total numbers or numbers per unit area of a particular species in an ecosystem. Exposure to toxicants is likely to lower populations by lowering reproductive rates, causing mortality or weakening membranes of the species. so that they become more vulnerable to predation, disease or parasites. In several cases of exposure to toxicants, a population may go to zero and stay there so long as exposure continues, or if the toxicant is removed, until immigration from outside the ecosystem restores the population. In other cases, the population is reduced and remains at a lower level so long as exposure of the toxicant continues. Another possibility for a population is to decline and then rise again as the population develops resistance to the effects of toxic substances. This effect has been observed in the case of exposure to insecticides of insects, whose short reproductive times enable natural selection to build populations resistant to the insecticides. One of the major objectives of ecotoxicology is the detection and prevention of pollutant effects on population structure and function. These effects may be determined by collection of empiric data or simulated with the use of population models. In the former case, natural populations are sampled in order to determine the effects of environmental contamination on density, abundance or biomass of indigenous organisms. These values from contaminated populations are then compared with those from reference population with no history of contamination in order to determine pollution effects. Alternatively, effects of pollutants on populations can be predicted or simulated using mathematical models. These models use empiric data such as abundance, age distribution, age specific mortality and fecundity in order to predict effects of pollutant exposure on abundance of individuals and rate of population change, growth or decline. The empiric data are gathered from organisms grown in laboratory cultures or from natural populations, and population parameters are calculated using linear or matrix algebra. Now, the effects on community. Any effect on populations may ultimately be manifest as effects on communities, because by definition communities are collection of interacting populations. Environmental contaminants can affect the structure of communities as well as the interaction of species within them. For example, it is well known that exposure to chemicals may cause a reduction in the community diversity, relative number of species, and change in community composition. Toxicants, for example, can directly change the community structure by the removal of one keystone species, a species that influences the community by its activity or role and not its numerical dominance. For example, removal of sea urchins from a rocky intertidal pool results in a very dramatic shift in the composition of epilithic algal species and biomass. Field and laboratory studies with freshwater invertebrates also suggest change in community interactions such as consequences of toxicant exposure. The trophic structure of communities is related to the relative abundance of species that feed on various food items, piscivorous, omnivorous, detritivores and insectivores, etc., or have various foraging methods, shredders, scrappers, etc. These changes in species trophic composition may come about by direct or indirect mechanisms. Now, the effects on ecosystems. An ecosystem consists of a variety of communities of organisms and their surrounding environment existing in a steady state. The important aspect of an ecosystem, like the flow of energy and the materials and the intricate relationship of the organisms with each other and with their surroundings, may be perturbed by the effects of toxicants. Exposure to xenobiotics may alter the hemostasis of individual organisms, leading to the effects on populations of specific kinds of organisms, communities of organisms and the whole ecosystems. Ecosystems can generally be divided into two categories: terrestrial ecosystems consisting of those that exist primarily on land, and aquatic ecosystems consisting of those that exist primarily in water. There are many interconnections between terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, and many ecosystems have both terrestrial and aquatic components. Exposure of organisms to toxicants in aquatic systems is normally through direct contact of the organism with contaminated water, which can be analyzed chemically for the presence of toxicants. Effects on terrestrial ecosystems. Terrestrial ecotoxicology is complicated by a number of factors. Terrestrial animals may move significant distances as they forage, migrate, defend their territories, and seek locations more amenable to their existence. Terrestrial environments may undergo sudden and dramatic changes in temperature, moisture, and other factors that affect the environment. It is against such a variable background that the terrestrial ecotoxicologists must attempt to determine the effects, often subtle and small, of xenobiotic chemicals, which are often present at low and variable concentrations. Dear students, acid effects on freshwater ecosystems. Some of the most well-studied effects of toxic substances on ecosystems have been those dealing with the effects of acid on freshwater ecosystems. Declines of pH from a nearly neutral range of 6.5 to 7.5 to values around 5.5 to 6 have been observed in some Scandinavian lakes during the approximate 30-year period following 1940. These declines have been accompanied by dramatic losses of commercially valuable salmon and trout populations. Lakes with pH less than 5.0 have become free of fish. Experimental studies of lake acidification have also shown changes in the phytoplankton and zooplankton communities, with the general loss of population diversity. In some cases, mats composed of just a few species of filamentous green algae changed the entire character of the lakes. Dear friends, finally, I will deliberate upon the ecosystem vulnerability. Vulnerability is a function of three factors: susceptibility to exposure, sensitivity, and recovery capability. The concept may be applied at different hierarchical levels, that is population and community, and is not accounted for in current ecological risk assessment procedures, mainly because current assessments are generally non-site specific, chemical oriented instead of ecosystem oriented. Assessing vulnerability is a key issue for the protection of specific ecosystems. Some tools capable of quantifying the vulnerability to specific stress factors have already been developed and proposed, particularly for freshwater ecosystems. The development, application, and validation of methods capable of assessing the vulnerability of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems to different kinds of stressors is a priority for the researchers. With this, we conclude. Thank you for watching.